Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
65 on Wednesday, snow on the ground tomorrow morning. Welcome to St. Louis, winter in 2024. But there's no global warming or anything like that. Hey, Alvin, Reid sitting in for Charlie Brennan. And thank you for joining us tonight on Donnybrook. Introducing Wendy Wiese from KTRS. Joe Holleman sitting in for our founder, Bill McClellan, both from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Another founder, Ray Hartmann, writes a column with Substack. And me tonight is Sarah Fenske from the Riverfront Times. Well, joy turned to sorrow real quick in Kansas City yesterday. What was a festive occasion was marred by a shooting that has left one woman dead, a young lady who worked for the equivalent of our KDHX here in St. Louis. But they're in Kansas City, and 22 people wounded, including up to, I think, 11 children. So just a horrible situation. Ray, what do you think? There was all kind of response from our side of the state and from all over the country, too.
Of course. Horrible day. Kansas City deserves better. The Chiefs fans, the Chiefs deserve better. It's who we are. And the cycle, of course, of both sides taking the story and trying to follow their own narrative. Obviously, I'm one of the people who thinks if you have a horrific act of gun violence, that is one that really leaves a mark, that people will be talking about for future Super Bowls and so forth. It is a good time to talk about doing something about gun violence. That said, I did my Substack, kind of busted the Missouri Conservative Caucus, which actually this morning retweeted complete falsehoods, claiming it was there was an illegal immigrant involved. It is a guy whose name they've used previously in other ones. And they've taken it down since. My Substack has this. I did a screenshot to catch him, but the point being, the Republicans want to make this, of course, about crime and illegal immigrants, and not about doing something about guns. And I'm one of the people who thinks while this particular act wouldn't be averted by any particular gun law, this is a good time to talk about doing something about gun laws, gun violence, because we have almost 500 million guns in this country. But having said that, it's just a horrible thing for the folks in Kansas City.
I'm not sure what to say is that, along with the sadness of the event, but I think the point that really needs to be made, aside from the two parties trying to make it about their specific argument, is the fact that there is indeed a reason this happened. And if we forget the fact that what it is that we had one or two people at an event who found it to be somewhat acceptable to not only bring guns, but in a crowded group, including children, to bring it out and engage in a gunfight. Now, if you want to identify what the problem was, that's the problem, is that there were several people who just thought, why not start a gunfight at a crowded area with a bunch of kids? That's the problem.
With 800 plus police officers. And we all heard the press conferences with the mayor and the police chief, and they thought, they were sure that they had done everything correctly. They went down the large crowd checklist, and I think most of us, we were more concerned about one of the players drinking too many Budweisers and falling off the top of the bus. And it turns out that that was not what we needed to worry about at all.
You know what? I went into this event thinking, okay, there's a good chance we're going to have one of these people trying to get attention shooting someone else. Because I'm now at the point that anytime I take my kids to any sort of large-scale gathering, I'm thinking, okay, is there going to be a shooting at this event? The gun violence is out of control in this country. And in this state, I'm not saying that we would be able to easily solve this by having some change to our state law, but our state law is one of the worst in terms of
from the bottom.
Just how easy it is for young people to get their hands on guns when they're not smart enough to know the long-term consequences that are going to destroy lives. These 11 kids that were injured. I mean, they're going to survive. They are scarred for life.
And we do know they're juveniles.
Yeah,
we don't know how old the suspects are. They could be 16 and a half. They could be 17, but we don't know that yet.
And my question is, when you were 16 or 17, did you know it was wrong to shoot somebody?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Joe's point is right, except for this. It's the kind of thing that you're describing is a byproduct of a society that has too many guns, and that always turns around and say, well, your new law a law that says take military weapons off the streets would not have prevented this one, and that's correct. But that isn't an argument that says, particularly now that we're focusing on gun violence again, and this is as good a time as any because we have one of these every day, that the arguments are we ought to find some common ground. There is no reason, for example, for civilians to possess military weapons in the name of the Second Amendment. That's the kind of thing we can work on, and if this is the time we work on it, even though these weren't military weapons involved, so be it. But we're not going to do it because the Republicans are just irrationally committed to more guns, and that's it.
And there's another side that seems irrationally committed to not blaming the person who actually used the gun.
I don't.
So if you want to find common ground, great, but that means both sides have to give.
Can you identify anybody that, honestly, that would not blame these idiots for this crime?
What are we talking about right now? We're talking about a change in a gun law, which you already admit you don't have a specific change in mind that would have alleviated this situation.
Well, okay. Before we move on,
before
we move on, just we don't even know exactly what gun was used.
That's right.
No, that's not the point.
No, it kind of is because for all we know, we don't know if the gun. While I do know. I don't know that the gun was obtained illegally. You can carry a gun and be a minor in the state of Missouri. That's a problem. I understand that. So I will follow up on what you said. All right, just real quick. That, crime has always, and I don't know if the assailants are black. I'm assuming they are, okay? But but I don't know that.
I think you should assume that.
No. I mean, welcome to the black world, okay? All right. I'm just being honest with you. Right now, a lot of people in African-American community are saying, like, I really hope that these aren't black kids, but my guess is that they're probably black kids. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And that leads to what I was going to say. Crime has been a problem in urban neighborhoods for decades. Murder has not been a problem in black neighborhoods for decades. And somebody has to take responsibility for that and not always put it on a gun, but put it in the hand of the young assailant. Now, I'm not saying that these people are black that fired these shots, but I'm sorry, but I believe they are, okay? And that's just a reality that in my world that I live with, and I'm sick of it. I am sick and tired of it. I mean, that's all I can say.
The one person we know for sure was black was one of the heroes who looked like a defensive back for the Chiefs, tack on a guy, which was unbelievable. And the heroes of the story, including some of the media people that kept their cool during this thing, what they were doing, there were some real heroes.
Yeah.
A number of guys went flying after these guys, risking their own lives. And to the extent there's a silver lining from this, it really does show. And those were black. That was a black man that tackled it.
Hold on. Just hold on.
This isn't
I'm not saying everybody is evil, is black, or anything like that. No, I know you're not. But I'm just saying this. I'm just giving you a little insight on when something like this happens. That is a thought.
Another thing that was really interesting, Jennifer and I talked about that this morning. People said the brave onlookers who tackled the suspect to the ground, they were not just brave. They were angry, so angry. Yeah. And it's lucky that those police officers were close by because they would have taken care of it.
No, I just saying, the one thing that frustrates me about this is there's no specific law that's going to cover everything. Murder laws don't keep murders from happening. The point is you've got to have a strategy for reducing gun violence of all kinds, and it starts with fewer guns.
You have legal and illegal weapons out there.
Enforcement?
Yeah, you have legal. The legal folks are going to abide by that.
There are ways to
illegal, the criminals are not going to.
You don't have to.
All right, we got to move on. All right, we got to go on to the next one, and it's another sad story. Okay. All right. A mother and daughter down from Chicago for the Drake concert are struck by a vehicle that allegedly ran a red light. We had a crazy driving person on 44 hit a school bus. Luckily, no kids were on it because the bus overturned. And this is kind of more not on the same like block, so to speak, and not to make light. But then we find out that police officers ran over a sign at a church and then covered it up. I mean, Joe, driving and what? I mean, what's?
Well, what struck me about this accident after the Drake concert was it was 2 days away from being exactly 1 year to the day that the young Tennessee volleyball player in a crash in downtown St. Louis lost both of her legs and started in the process, which ended up costing Kim Gardner her job as prosecuting attorney. So the fact that that's what first grabbed me was just the sheer coincidence and the timing of it. But I honestly believe that when you look at these situations and we say, in fact, this person not just ran a red light. Apparently the reports now are ran a series of red lights and then sideswiped a car, which sent it out of control, which threw him into the two mother and daughter who were crossing the streets and killed them. And what we have here is a lack of enforcement of laws. It's that simple. And we have gotten to a point, at least in this city, you can even argue the country, where it's this, well, let's not prosecute small crimes like running red lights. So then someone runs 6 red lights and then they go too fast. At some point, the law has to be enforced and criminals need to be prosecuted. So I think that part of it, you can go, oh, well, that's simplistic. By all means, we offer a lot of simplistic solutions here. But writing tickets when people break traffic laws, taking people into jail for not paying traffic tickets, those are not unfair if done fairly. But what happens is that when people see you don't have to, as a city resident, I never leave a stop sign without counting to about 1 Mississippi up to 3.
That's right.
Because I'm almost certain someone will be running a red light or a stop sign, and I know there will be no police officer there because the force is also down 200-300 people, that they won't be there to write them a ticket. That's what used to keep me inside the speed limit, obeying the laws. I didn't want to pay tickets. That's exactly what the enforcement was. So I, most of the time, obeyed the law so that I wouldn't get in trouble with the police. So let the police start, hire more police, let them start enforcing the law, and prosecutors prosecute
But look at all the expired tags that we, I mean, you know, it's just
That's just the beginning of it.
Yeah.
You can call it the broken windows.
No, it is. You're right.
It's exactly where that happens. If I can get away with this, then let's go to this next one. Let's go to the next one. And anybody who's had a kid knows if you don't get in trouble for when a kid's 10 minutes late for coming home, the next time he's a half hour late. And if he doesn't get in trouble, it's next. You always push the envelope until someone says no.
I'm glad you brought up the Janae Edmondson thing here because obviously it is an eerie parallel that this was a year ago. But I think when that happened, it was a wake-up call for a lot of people. Okay, what's happening at the circuit attorney's office? We all got very focused on that. It became the story of the year that, you know, Kim Gardner ended up being forced to resign. But there was a bigger issue here. Downtown residents have been saying, we're saying for months prior to that incident, there is out of control driving in this neighborhood. Somebody has to do something about this. You know, during the pandemic, when downtown emptied out, it left us with these giant wide streets and people started going down there specifically to cause mayhem. And that was the whole side of this that the Janae Edmondson story should have been a wake-up call on. And we ignored that wake-up call because we were all so focused on the circuit attorney's office.
Exactly. And this isn't some cute story about St. Louis drivers. This is about downtown in particular and the city in general. Just anecdotally, visually, any of us that have spent, I lived a long time in the city, it's way worse than it ever was. Joe, you're absolutely right that more police is one of the real problems here is we don't have enough police to patrol them. And before this, they were saying, well, it's all Kim Gardner's fault for not prosecuting. Actually, the problem is combination. And now, I would point out to you that more police would not solve this one any more than better gun laws would solve the one in Kansas City. But the fact is, you're right. And you're absolutely right. We need more police, and we need police officers who have an attitude about about enforcing those laws. I can remember when I lived in the city, they were so jaded, they wouldn't even come to talk about a stolen car. And that was in the 80s.
Right.
So
I mean, that's still happening.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, I'm trying to say that was in the 80s.
Right.
So this isn't, I mean, you've got to change. You need more accountability on the part of the police, too.
Honestly, that is what, yes, because you've got the police officers just driving into Bar PM. You got them driving into this church sign, covering it up. Everybody's driving crazily.
And where's the civilian oversight board?
And we have to remember with the Janae Edmondson situation, that driver had been implicated in a case that was taken care of allegedly by the circuit attorney and Kim Gardner. So that was the extra.
Well, it certainly wasn't a misdirected focus on Kim Gardner's office.
No, it wasn't.
No, as anybody would like to go back and try to respin that story.
And
it was a needed focus on Kim Gardner's office. Now what's needed is a focus on the lack of enforcing basic safety laws that serve everybody in the city.
But the most basic question remains: who? RoboCop? I mean, we don't have enough police
officers. How about hire more police officers?
It's hard.
It's hard. They've been trying, haven't they?
It's hard.
They say.
Well, and
you also find out that the city is 30% of their jobs are vacant. How hard are we trying to hire people?
Well, I'll tell you, every city in the country, Joe, every city in the country is having the same problem. And to your point, I've always said the same thing. Pay them better, treat them better, and expect more of them, okay? But you talk about simplistic. That's as simplistic as you can get. But yes, but every city in America is having trouble.
All right. Okay, boy, lots of gloom and doom. Let's follow up on that one.
How about them Redbirds?
All right. Okay, so a woman is robbed on Christmas Eve. All right, on Metro. And then there's a pretty clear video that's released like earlier this week. And I'm kind of shocked that it took that long, and because you can obviously see who the person is, alleged suspect, on it, and for all I know, I could have been sitting next to him on the Metro, a week later. Is that too long, or does that, bother you at all, Wendy?
Well, first of all, the woman, it was a brutal assault. She was smashed against the window. She had a concussion. She couldn't work for several days. Seemed like there was some mental issues with the suspect. But the county police, the line about how it takes a while to, we want to run it through certain systems and make sure that we can't apprehend the person on our own or identify the person on our own. That seems like selective memory, because most of us have seen the shots that are taken from cameras at ATMs, cameras on sidewalks, so I'm not sure what was going on here.
I don't find this one unusual, I will say. I'm thinking of, there was another case where it happened on a Metro bus, I believe, or maybe it was Metrolink, where the FBI got involved, and there was a brutal attack on a transgender person going to a job interview, and it took about 7 months for the FBI to say, here's this person who did this brutal attack. Unfortunately, we were just talking about how understaffed local law enforcement is. These things do take time. I think they frequently also try to see, okay, if this is relatively easy, we'll go pick this person up. We can't come to the public on every one of these things, or they get jaded on this.
Why not?
Yeah. Well,
I'm sure Metrolink wants that information out there, right? But I'm going to go with Sarah on the fact that I'm going to go with the Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity, or in this case, bureaucracy. So the idea that it took
even lack of bureaucracy,
a couple months to get it through, I'd need to know more before I'd say somebody was intentionally holding this back.
I don't think anybody
I'm not saying they weren't.
Yeah, they weren't doing that.
I'm not saying they weren't. We just, incompetency needs a little more time.
Okay, but I just think that it rises beyond incompetency if somebody was assaulted, let alone murdered. Because that's just, there's a menace to society out there, okay? This, most speeders aren't runner-overs,
right.
Like this person, but this guy obviously,
we have a lot of menaces to society that are out there. I think that's kind of the problem, right? It's like every single one of these cases, I'm sure, feels like a house on fire. Let's get this out to the media. But, I mean, we have multiple people being killed every day in the city, and then in the metro, even more. The St. Louis County, there's a lot of brutal beatings that go on a daily basis.
Okay. All right. Well, Illinois, they are debating whether to become, I believe, the 23rd state to become a right-to-die state, where I guess you could basically decide when you wanted to leave this earth, and maybe with the help of others. Ray, is this a good idea?
Finally, a cheerful time.
Yeah, I know.
God, I mean, people are out there going, yeah. You just increased the demand this week for the right to die.
St. Louis,
I mean, a lot of people
I tried so hard.
People are like,
Nothing.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Wow. I believe in, I pride myself as an advocate of disability rights, and I know in the disability community there's a lot of concern about this. I am fundamentally in favor of the right to die as a personal choice, if you will, but there have to be lots of safeguards on it. In other words, it's not as simple as somebody being sad one day and just saying it. There are, in other states that do it, I want to say Oregon, there's a number, in a lot of countries.
Vermont.
There are ways to do it that have safeguards, medical safeguards, and to do it the right way. But there are cases where somebody, particularly somebody that's terminally ill, should have the right to make that decision on a personal basis, and call it pro-choice, whatever you want to call it. But I think that has to be done, but it has to be done in a way that prevents people from essentially, for whatever reason, taking someone else taking that step. So
my thought is that if you are in a situation like that, if you are a advanced senior or you have some debilitating type of disease, I feel as though if that was legal, that you could be pressured into doing it. And maybe it really isn't your decision. And I just
said you got to have safeguards.
Yeah, I don't know how you
should
monitor that. Well, that's why it makes me uneasy.
Okay.
That's
okay.
All right.
I'm with Ray on this one. I can't imagine that there's anybody else who has any say-so more than I do about when I go. And the idea, I mean, to me, it is pro-choice at its very basic. If there's one decision I think that is solely yours, if a doctor says, if we put you through these treatments, you'll be fine. I don't want them. Who else gets to decide? Who else has earned the right, other than me, on when I end my life? And yes, of course, you need safeguards. And a lot of those safeguards are built in for a person who's assisting someone, so they don't become an accomplice to a crime.
But how do you monitor that?
What's really interesting is
they do it in other states.
Yeah, it has, and I guess the idea is it can be figured out how you write the law. I think you have to answer the question: is this something that we should allow? And technically, you're already allowed to take your own life if you so choose.
But that's against the law, though.
But they're not going to prosecute you.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that. I'm not joking. It's against the law.
It's against the law. But the point is,
finally found somebody who won't prosecute.
That's right. That's right.
This changes.
They'll probably file charges in that one.
This changes the classification of the death, does it not? So that it doesn't say suicide. It says terminal illness. And I think it's so true what they say about the older you get, how things constantly are shifting. I've seen it in my own life. People, we can't say, my faith dictates that, no, you wait until God calls you home. But I also believe it is between a person who is in pain. We don't know about the pain of another person. We don't know how deep that goes. If they're alone, it's between them and their God. I'm very, very conflicted about it.
Okay. Let's talk about liquor real quick.
Yeah,
Let's have some.
I was going to say, we need some liquor. We don't need it.
Sarah, we're down to about 2 minutes. But anyway, you had a great story. They're trying to streamline the process to get a liquor license. Sounds like a good idea to me because it's backlogged, and it just sounded like something needed to be done for the good folks that want to open a restaurant. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, these restaurants have been complaining for quite some time now. It is such a long lag time to try to get a liquor license in the city of St. Louis. And there's this very complicated process where you have to go around and gather signatures, and it gives neighborhoods a great say in this process. But for businesses, it's very costly. You pretty much can't do it without a lawyer. In some cases, if you're a person of color or you're an immigrant and you're supposed to go door to door in these neighborhoods, it's not necessarily safe. They may not like the look of you. They don't want to sign your petition. It's become kind of hostile to new businesses opening. The Board of Aldermen has a proposal that would dramatically streamline this. It has triggered some blowback.
And the Board of Aldermen has been lately fairly hostile, in my opinion, and the mayor, frankly, to the concerns of resident groups. And I think you got to balance the two. There's no question that there's some, from reading the coverage in the Riverfront Times, which was, that newspaper did really well on this. The
New management.
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's it. I think that's a good point. No, surprising. No, there are some certainly reforms to make it easier. There's difficulties in finding people and so forth. That clearly need to be addressed. But I think that we need, as I've said ad infinitum on this program, particularly downtown, we need to build from the neighborhoods out. Well, and anything that reduces the neighbor's ability to control their surroundings has to be done very deliberately.
I think one thing everybody at this table can agree on, the last thing the city of St. Louis needs to do is alienate any of the residents in these neighborhoods. Yeah. We can't do that.
And I think from reading the story, I sort of, at least at this time, side with Alderwoman Kara Spencer, who's not opposed to it, but said, let's hang on a sec, because we got to admit, we are taking power away from residents. So for people who want involvement in government and transparency and all those things, you're taking a voice away from the people. I also understand that restaurants have too many hoops to jump through, but it sounds like with the Homeless Bill of Rights, the Board of Aldermen tends to want to push things through fast without building the proper consensuses.
Okay.
And that's what Alderwoman Spencer pointed out. And in this case, I think I agree with that.
All right. Okay, real quick. You know, we're like family here at this table, and you're like part of our family, too, and this is just a lively discussion. Don't think that we're making light of any of this death and mayhem that goes on.
No,
but you're with us. It's like we're at the dinner table and we're talking.
Thank you for that disclaimer.
No, in all honesty, the smiles are kind of hiding some pain this week. All right. You want to write a letter? Send it to Donnybrook, care of 9PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Send an email to donnybrook@9pbs.org or a text, not a text, yeah, a text. Twitter, X, what? Yeah, hashtag Donnybrook STL. I want to thank Sarah Fenske for sitting in, and also Joe Holleman. But before we go, Donnybrook comment line 314-512. If you put it back up there for me, I'm sorry. There we go, 9094. And check us out on the podcast. Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, or Apple. Once again, thanks to our guests. Thanks to you all. Hey, sunnier days, brighter news next week, I promise.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.